All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Just getting some beginning stuff set up. Welcome to the live stream once again on a Thursday night. We'll get back to Fridays next week. Couple housekeeping notes, I guess. I have not been able to get in touch with Den. I hope he's okay. I'm not sure if it's just the Thursday night thing or what, but I hope I get to see him soon because he's such a big help on these days. What else do I need to do? Just double checking that everything is working. I'm not seeing any comments here, but I hope everyone can see the comments. You can always support this channel by going to patreon.com/hement. And as always, you could support me and you can read all the articles by going to friendlyatheist.com. That's the easiest way to get access to my usual stuff. Okay, I do see comments. So you're alive and well. Very good. Um, Listen, there are weeks when I only have like a couple stories I want to talk about. Then there are weeks like this week when I feel like I deserve hazard pay. But we're gonna. What else do I need to do? If you were at BajaCon last weekend, it was wonderful. Got to meet a whole bunch of people, so I appreciate anyone who came out to Southwestern Ontario. Also, a little bit of housekeeping note. I am going to be at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago next week. I am going as a member of the press. I'm excited. I don't know what exactly I can do there just yet, besides just offering thoughts afterwards. But I hope I can talk about that with all of you next weekend, next week when I do the live stream as well. Okay, we're gonna get into a whole bunch of stories. I just want to make sure I have everything I need here. All right, we'll see and just run with it. So, one of the things I do, not just for the live stream, but for the articles I write, is I keep tabs on what certain Christians are talking about, posting online. I may not comment on it, but it's nice to know what they're up to. And one person I've been following forever is someone known as the activist mommy. Her name is Elizabeth Johnston. She's one of those, you've seen all those moms who want to ban books, all those conservative mothers who have to protect the children by making sure they never learn anything. She's one of the old school, those women, the sort of person who like burned a book on camera or burned a magazine on camera because she didn't like what was inside. She's still going at it. It's been many years since she hit any sort of viral fame. And then I think she had some personal issues, but now she's back doing some ministry that teaches women I don't know what. But weirdly enough, on her channel recently, she interviewed Kirk Cameron. You know Kirk Cameron. Kirk Cameron is the star, one of the stars of the sitcom Growing Pains from the 1980s. And he's also one of the guys famous for uh, that video that Ray Comfort made many, many years ago, where he calls a banana the atheist's worst nightmare. If you've ever seen that skit, it's not a skit. He's totally real when he does it. But if you've ever seen that video, Ray Comfort's holding the banana, talking about how evolution could never have designed it. And Kirk Cameron is sitting just off to the side, nodding along because he agrees with everything. So Kirk Cameron's been known not as an actor, but as an evangelist, and then, kind of an actor, but only in crappy Christian movies that no one watches. So Elizabeth Johnston was interviewing Kirk Cameron, which is like a mix of all these horrible ideas coming together at the same time. So, I had to watch. And it turned out it wasn't even that long of a video, but I'm going to play for you the one clip that I saw in there. I think it's an amalgamation of a couple different scenes, but it's a very short clip because it wasn't that long of a video, but they were talking about how horrible public schools are. And let me play it for you, and then we will talk about this. Okay.
If we outsource our parenting because it's easier, or we believe the lie that we're not qualified experts to educate our kids, so we have to subcontract our parenting and discipleship out to the government, we're going to have little kids that come back as little Marxists, little statists, little atheists, drag queens, strippers, drug dealers, and you name it. pull your kids out of the schools that are teaching your kids bad things and
Mm.
put them into places that teach them good things.
What? Just to recap there. If you send your kids to public schools, says Kirk Cameron, who I don't believe went to a public school because he was doing the acting school because he was on set. If you send your kids to public school, he says, they will come back as little Marxists, which I don't know if you know this, it's not on the curriculum for third graders. Little statists, and it took me a while. I still don't know if I know the meaning of that word. I know conservatives rail against globalism as if like one government controls the entire world, and they don't like that. And I know nationalism, like Christian nationalism, where, you know, a certain group of Christians gets to control policy for the entire country. I assume that's what statism is, where a state controls stuff, but I guess they think that's bad. I'm not really sure how this works. Maybe I'm totally wrong. No idea what little statist means. But he also said if you send your kids to public school, they will come back as little atheists. Surprise to me. Drag queens, strippers, drug dealers, you name it. All these horrible things if they go to public schools. So that clip I just played for you, I shared on X/Twitter, and so many people chimed in because maybe like you, maybe like me, they're very defensive of public schools. I went to public schools my entire life. I went to college at a public university. So I'm very defensive of public schools. I also taught at one for several years. And of course, not just the people I went to school with, but the kids I taught who have since graduated and gone on to launch their careers. I promise you, the ones I keep in touch with and have seen, they are all doing these wonderful, meaningful things where they are helping other people. None of that seems to matter to Kirk Cameron. None of that seems to be in the none of that seems to be a possible outcome where you could graduate from a public school and then give back to your community and serve them in a positive way. And also I don't like that he's just assuming that drag queens and strippers have no value whatsoever. Like, come on, stop being so sex negative. They just drag queens into everything too. That's unnecessary. So, this trashing of the public schools, just completely senseless. So, after I posted that, the number of people who commented were unusually high to the point where I started seeing news articles about that clip. Here's just a sampling of what I saw. This is in the Charlotte Observer, but they're getting an article from Parade Magazine. I like how they don't say Kirk Cameron like the star. They say, hey, his sister's on Full House and Fuller House. Candace Cameron Bure's brother, Kirk, faces backlash for controversial parenting comments. And oh, look at this. The father of six appeared on the Elizabeth Johnston podcast to talk about family, religion, and more. And soon after it was released, hello, I shared a clip from the conversation that started getting attention. That's very nice of them. There was also this in HuffPost, which was interesting. Uh, critics, what do we have here? Critics school Kirk Cameron after weird rant about atheist drag queens and strippers. Very nice. There's the tweet right there. But really, this one was my favorite. This is from Newsweek. A growing pain star Kirk Cameron sparks outrage with parenting rant. I like this one because not only did they quote me here, they also pointed out that I do a podcast with my podcast co-host Jessica, and they shared all of that. Lovely, good for them. So all of these outlets, and by the way, all these articles then get syndicated or passed on wire services to all these other smaller newspapers. So Google alerts were going crazy. But my favorite thing about this is that after it got all that attention, guess who finally chimed in? It would be Mr. Kirk Cameron himself. Check this out because this is what he finally responded with. Here's my tweet, and here's him quote tweeting it. Let's zoom in and read through this. While taken out of context, stop. No, we can't go on right there. I watch these things. I have a habit of watching a lot of Christian sermons online. I assure you, I'm not doing it for my health. It's not good for my health, but I assure you, I don't take things out of context. I don't need to, because quoting these people in context makes them look horrible enough as is. So, this idea that I took them out of context, in what context would what Kirk Cameron said be okay? I mean, just ask yourself that. Unless he said all of that stuff and then I clipped out the word not at the very end, which I promise you he didn't do. Like, you could see the original video, it's online. It's not taken out of context. Anyway, while taken out of context, uh I'm glad this is topic trending on X, as I talk about more in my new book, Born to be Brave, cuz no one knows courage and bravery more than a cis straight white guy. The problems of our struggling culture can be traced back to disengaged parenting and turning away from God. This now is turning into like a JD Vance impression. The only solution is turning back to God and parents fiercely guarding our children's academic, spiritual, and emotional learning. And listen, that might sound okay, but that suggests that parents, you have to keep your kids in a bubble. Otherwise, all hell will break loose and your kids might learn to think for themselves. And that would be terrible. Sending our children to public school for education is like sending them to a candy store for nutrition, which again, you're reiterating the thing I quoted you saying, which you just said takes you out of context. You're saying if you send your kids to public school for education, they're not actually getting it. And there are millions upon millions of people who know better and disagree and find that so grossly offensive, because not only are you trashing public schools, you're trashing all of our teachers, you're trashing the entire profession of education, all these people who dedicate their time and careers into educating people for very little money, relatively speaking. And here's Kirk Cameron saying, oh, you can't go to a public school for education. Send them to what? Homeschooling? Private Christian school? Like, you don't want to do those comparisons because they're not going to go well. A few kids do okay, and a lot of them struggle in homeschooling, Christian education, whatever. And then he continues, parents, you are your children's best advocate, teacher, and guide. No government program can replace you. And then to me personally, he says, Hemant Mehta, I am a recovering atheist. Stop. No, you're not. You were not at any of the club meetings back in the day. Here's when he says he's a recovering atheist, here's what that means. When he was younger, he didn't really think about religion much. It just didn't cross his mind. Guess what? A lot of young people have other things they are obsessed with. It's not weird that someone might not be thinking about religion. Doesn't mean they're atheists. It means I don't think about it one way or the other. A lot of people are apolitical in the same way. They just don't think about it. Doesn't make them supporters of one group or another. So this idea that he's a recovering atheist because he found God later in life, no, you weren't an atheist. You were apathetic. You were ignorant. Use one of those words. You were not a recovering atheist. You were not someone who advocated that people stop believing in God. You just didn't care. Stop using that language. But Kirk Cameron says, I'm a recovering atheist. I want to send you a copy of my book, On the House, in hopes that you, a friendly atheist, would be open to some wisdom from above. I don't want his book. Here's what he doesn't seem to realize. The reason I do a lot of the atheist advocacy that I do, or at least the way I got started in it, some of you know this, I'm guessing most of you don't. Like 20 years ago, I did some stupid stunt where I like sold my soul on eBay. Big quote fingers on that one because that's not how it went down. But I wrote a book about visiting a whole bunch of Christian churches. And when that book came out, because it was a real book, legit publisher and whatnot, I did a lot of interviews. Not only did I do a lot of interviews, I did a lot of interviews with Christian outlets who were very intrigued by the idea of an open atheist visiting churches like the ones they go to and documenting my experiences there. One of those interviews was with Kirk Cameron. And I think it was on Ray Comfort's Ministries show, but Kirk Cameron was the host. And I knew what his shtick was like back in the day. Because here's what he does in every interview. He butters you up for like 2 minutes talking about, good for you for expanding your worldview and thinking about this stuff. Hey, do you think you're a good person? And of course, most people are going to say, yeah, of course I'm a good person. Do you think you're going to go to heaven or hell after you die? And then, this is the game they play. The point they want to make is that it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, because unless you accept Jesus, you're never getting to heaven, as if that's supposed to scare me in some way. And I'm sure there's a more clever answer to all that. But I knew what game he was playing. I remember trying to, as soon as I heard him launch into that line of questioning, I had my rebuttals ready to go. And I don't know. That was the interview. It happened, and then I moved on. And I'm like, I think I walked away from it thinking, 80s TV star Kirk Cameron thinks I'm going to hell. Very interesting. Anyway, he's forgotten about that, which is fine. I'm not expecting him to remember it, but I just enjoy that Kirk Cameron totally forgot. We have chatted many times, at least that one time before, and I've chatted to his buddy Ray Comfort a couple of times since then. And he's like, you don't know me, but I'll send you a copy of my book. Don't want your book. Hey, you know what? I'll send you a copy of my book, because apparently you don't read anything except for the Bible, and maybe you need to expand your mind. You could go to a public school and learn a lot. Doesn't seem like that's any interest to you. But there you go. That was my week with Kirk Cameron. I'm gonna stop there for a second. I'm gonna apologize because I don't know that I can get to or read through every single one of these comments, especially because I have a gazillion stories I want to get through today. But I will say, as I'm going through this, if you leave a super chat, it'll catch my attention, and you can also leave donations that way and whatnot. So yeah, I'll put that out there. Give me a second to close through this because I got to get to a story that makes me even angrier. Um, okay. I think I have everything I need. Um, I appreciate this. Thank you so much, Beyond Storm Chasing. These people are just giving you free Patreon tier names left and right. We now have Lizard Mafia and Cryo Orphans. I'm going to get to Lizard Mafia later in today's episode. But I appreciate that link. Thank you so much. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk about Richard Dawkins. I don't want to talk about Richard Dawkins. I have better things to talk about in general than Richard Dawkins, but I feel like we have to because this guy's had an insane week where he gets in the news. He's trending on Twitter again for all the wrong reasons. And all of it, the only reason I feel like I have to talk about it is because, for better or for worse, he still represents the guy people think of when they think of atheism. Okay. So here's what happened with Dawkins. Okay. And then we will it's just so damn depressing. Let me start with this. He said this week that Facebook censored him because of a tweet he made. And I'm going to start at that tweet and we're going to try to do this chronologically. Okay. This goes back to a week ago because Dawkins heard about the Olympics and he tweeted what J.K. Rowling had tweeted, what a bunch of right-wing conspiracy theorists was tweeting about the Algerian boxer, the female boxer who ended up winning the gold medal. So this is what he tweeted. I'm going to zoom in on this so you could see it. This is a picture of two of the boxers who were competing in the Olympics. And here's his commentary. Two men masquerading as women are being allowed to box against real women in the Olympics. And the person on the left over there in the pink, that's the one who ended up winning gold, Imani Khalif, an Algerian woman who, like I said, went on to win the gold medal. Now, if you haven't followed this controversy very, very much, let me try to sum it up as best I can. And I know I'm not doing every detail, but here's the idea. Khalif was accused of having XY chromosomes and therefore not being a real woman. The problem with that is that Khalif was assigned female at birth, lives her life as a woman, identifies as a woman today. She is not trans. She is not intersex. She has never been anything except female. the International Olympic Committee, like the group that oversees the Olympics, said that Khalif and that other boxer met their eligibility criteria. You would think the IOC has a vested interest in making sure the rules are being followed at all times, because that's how the Olympics works. Like, you'll get disqualified if you break the rules. I saw people get disqualified in different events. Like, countries lost medals because someone didn't touch the wall the right way or so. You think they're going to let someone compete without going through all these tests and stuff like that? That's insane. So the IOC said, yeah, this person's fine. So there was that. And it's also ridiculous to think that Khalif, if she were an openly trans woman, like, do you think that's even possible in Algeria, a country that has one of the worst track records in the world when it comes to LGBTQ rights? Those are like non-existent in Algeria. And critics who are pretending that she's trans are suggesting that not only she lives as a trans woman in Algeria, but Algeria allowed her to represent their country on a global stage. Like, none of that makes any sense. In fact, at the Olympics, there were 0 trans athletes competing this year. Now, it's possible they could be eligible in certain circumstances, but this year there were none. That's it. That's how it was. So, where did this controversy come from where people started accusing her of being trans? Well, basically, there were stories spread about how both of those boxers were eliminated from the International Boxing Association's World Championships last year because the IBA's president said they failed a gender eligibility test because of their XY chromosomes. And you would think, well, that seems pretty straightforward, right? But no, because guess what? That claim was never backed up by any evidence. It's not like they released any tests or anything. Oh, and by the way, the IBA's president is Russian, and they only brought up that claim that Khalif was trans after Khalif beat another female boxer who was Russian. And after they disqualified Khalif for that reason, the Russian boxer like rose in the standings at that tournament. Like, that seems pretty corrupt, don't you think? It's interesting that the IBA did not ban Khalif until after she beat that Russian opponent. So this allegation that J.K. Rowling made, here's what J.K. Rowling posted online earlier in the month. The idea that those objecting to a male punching a female in the name of sport are objecting because they believe Khalif to be trans is a joke. We object because we saw a male punching a female. No, you didn't. You know how I know that? Because it was a woman punching another woman, because it's boxing in the Olympics. Even Khalif's opponent in that match, who lost it within like a minute, said later, yeah, I was crying. I'm paraphrasing. Like, she said, I was crying. I was upset. I did not shake Khalif's hand, but it wasn't out of disrespect to Khalif. It's because my Olympic dream was over and I was sad, which makes sense. Like, she was sad she lost. She was sad she didn't get to go on. But even the opponent was like, but yeah, Khalif won fair and square. Everything is cool. So J.K. Rowling spread that lie. And anyway, so Richard Dawkins spread this same lie. He didn't just spread the lie. He also started tweeting other anti-trans stuff because Dawkins is just ridiculously anti-trans. Here's another one Dawkins posted. A guy on a motorcycle, I guess, in front of a bunch of cyclists. And there's the caption: biker who identifies as a cyclist wins the Tour de France. Ha ha ha. It's anti-trans because trans people identify as helicopters, whatever the joke is supposed to be. He also retweeted this joke. You could see at the top of your screen, Richard Dawkins retweeted this. First biological cheetah who identifies as a man set to take gold for a misspelled Liechtenstein at the Paris Olympics. Get it? Because trans people are like that cheetah, and it's unfair, I think. I don't know. It's just Babylon Bee style anti-trans bullshit. So this is Dawkins now. This is who he is. He just spreads anti-trans misinformation for the hell of it because he's smart about evolution and dumb about like 90% of everything else. This is just who he is now. I've done another video in the past and another live stream where he platformed on his podcast an anti-trans person to let's just mock these things that they're very ignorant about. What Dawkins doesn't do, which is surprising to me because he is famous and he could get anybody he wants on his podcast or whatnot. Like, he could call up just about any scientist and say, I want to have a discussion about this, and you know a lot about it. Would you talk to me? And they would almost certainly say yes. And he never does that. He only wants to talk to other crazy people. So, all of that happened. It wasn't, I mean, Dawkins saying transphobic stuff, sadly, not that big of a surprise. But the reason this stuff became a big deal is because he ended up tweeting this last week. Let me show you this. My entire Facebook account has been deleted. Seemingly, no reason given, because I tweeted that genetically male boxers such as Imani Khalif, XY, undisputed, should not fight women in Olympics. Of course, my opinion is open to civilized argument, but outright censorship? First of all, genetically male. How do you know that? You do not know that. You are getting that from misinformation that is online somewhere. What is this thing in the parentheses about Imani Khalif? XY, undisputed. What do you mean it's undisputed? It is very much disputed because that information is not coming from a credible source. And here's Dawkins just shitting it out there for the world to see. And then he's saying my Facebook account was deleted because I tweeted that dumb thing, which also makes no sense at all. I'll get back to that in a second. But what's interesting about this, Elon Musk retweeted that with his usual one-word comment. Wow. Later on, responding to someone else posting about this, look at this. Here's some rando saying Facebook censors renowned UK biologist for opposing male athletes in women's sports. To which Elon Musk says, Facebook, aka Meta, can never be trusted. Yeah, you know who you should trust? A guy who can't work a live stream with Donald Trump in 2024. Okay. So that's how far this stuff was spreading. Dawkins spread his lies. Then he made an accusation. And then that started spreading everywhere. And now this whole story is all over the place, which is ridiculous. But think about this. His accusation, Dawkins' accusation that Facebook censored him, never made any sense. Because think about this. Why would Facebook punish him for something he posted on Twitter? They are different companies. They have different moderation rules. They have different people working there. Why would one company care about what you post on the other one? That doesn't make any sense. And then why would Facebook punish him for anti-trans thinking that is all over the place on Facebook? Evangelist Franklin Graham, who has a gazillion followers on Facebook, posts so much more vile stuff than Dawkins did and does it all the time. Franklin Graham's still on Facebook. I am not even friends with, I don't think, any anti-trans people. Otherwise, I would have called them out a while ago. But I still saw many accusations, the false misinformation about Khalif on my feed. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Because anti-trans stuff was everywhere. That's the answer. So this idea that Facebook is punishing Richard Dawkins and only Richard Dawkins for shit a lot of dumb people were saying, that's ridiculous. All right. And then, listen, if you've ever had a Facebook page that got a warning for something you posted or was on the verge of getting deleted because of something you posted, then you know how this works. Facebook doesn't just zap it out of existence. They send you a warning when you log in. It says, hey, you posted this. You cannot post this, so delete it now, or we may have to take further action. Like, they always tell you what's going on. You don't have to agree with it or like it, but they do tell you what's happening. So this idea that Facebook nuked his page out of existence without telling him anything, that seems really weird. Very unusual. That's just not how anything works on that site. But that raises a question like, what the hell happened to Richard Dawkins' page? Well, a couple days later, here two things happened. that tweet where Richard Dawkins accused Facebook of nuking his page was deleted, completely gone. I showed you a screenshot for that reason, because it's not up there anymore. The other thing is Richard Dawkins' page was back up. Here it is. It's up there right now. His page is back up and running, and he's just posting his usual boring questions about stuff like whatever, who cares? It's fine. But his page is back up and running. So something happened. Something happened. What the hell happened, right? And only after all that did we start to get answers. My favorite answer, and this did not get the attention that Dawkins' allegation got, is that someone from Facebook publicly chimed in, okay, in response to what he was saying. This is, I'm going to show you this. This is Danny Lever, and she is Public Affairs and Communications Director at Meta, the company that runs Facebook. And she says there's no censorship at all. And just read through this, because she posted a version of this message all over the place, trying to tamp down misinformation, okay? This is not what happened. Dawkins' account appears to have been compromised or hacked, so we took action to secure the account and prevent wrong usage of the page. That happened on July 30th. His last post was on July 25th, before the Olympics even started, and was not even topical to boxing. This action had nothing to do with any content Mr. Dawkins posted, and we're in the process of restoring the page as soon as it is secured. While we were focused on securing the page, we regret that we were not able to communicate this to the account holder more promptly. So, let me put that in English in case you need any help here. Dawkins' page got hacked, or at least Facebook thought he got hacked, so they shut down the page and basically said, hey, Dawkins, is this you or is your page hacked? And all Dawkins had to do is say, no, everything is cool. And that's it. They would have given him the page back without an issue, but he hadn't taken that step. That's what it looked like had happened. This person from Facebook also said directly to Dawkins under that tweet, let me show you this, the removal of your page was a precautionary measure due to indications of potential compromise, not due to any issues with the content you posted. We're actively working to secure the page and will restore it promptly once we ensure its safety. It's possible you were not notified promptly while we were focused on securing your page, and we apologize for that, which is a very polite way of saying, like, listen, old man, log into Facebook and take care of this shit. Sorry, we can't make it more clear to you. So now we have an answer. They thought his page was hacked. Dawkins didn't fix the problem. What the hell? And then, you know how I know this is really messed up? Because I looked at Richard Dawkins' Twitter feed before he tweeted about the boxer. And guess what he wrote days before to confirm what that Facebook lady was saying? This is from, look at the date here, August 2nd. Well before his tweet about the boxer, he says, my Facebook page has been deleted for no apparent reason, and we have not received a response through Meta or Facebook for a resolution. Was it something I said? This is before the boxer thing. So just timeline here. He posts this tweet right now saying his Facebook page was deleted for reasons unknown. Then he says something stupid on Twitter about the Algerian boxer, falsely accusing her of being trans and therefore not eligible to compete. Then he says, my page was deleted. Was it because of that tweet? And that goes viral. Meanwhile, had Dawkins just rewound the tape a few days, he would have seen, buddy, your page was deleted way before you tweeted that comment. So what the hell are you doing? What is going on with this old man? What the hell? And then, last night, after all of this, after all the drama he caused, he finally posts something on his own Substack, because he has one. And look at this. I got it wrong. And just think for a second. I mean, that's a catchy headline. What did you get wrong, Richard Dawkins? Think about the options here. I was wrong to accuse Facebook. I was wrong to not check that my page was deleted before I said it was deleted. Am I wrong about the trans athlete who's not trans? I mean, it could be any of these things. He's wrong about a lot of things. Maybe he's wrong about all the shit he's been saying for the previous several years. Anyway, I'm going to scroll down to the third paragraph here. We'll come back up to that in a second. But look at this explanation, which blows my mind here. We'll go back up in a second. But look at this. On August 10th, I received an email from an official at Facebook saying he was looking into the question, which, by the way, as someone who has a page on Facebook, that type of service is not available to normies like me. He sent me a second email the same day giving a full explanation. Facebook's records showed, he explained, that one of the admins with access to my account had been hacked as long ago as June 22nd, and the hacker added a flurry of unauthorized admins. So it looks like someone with access to Dawkins' page is now adding like 10, 20 people and saying you can all run the page, which is what you would do if you wanted bad people to run the page and give everybody access to it. Bad idea. Facebook sees that and then shuts down the page, which is exactly what you want Facebook to do in that situation. Dawkins goes on to say, their subsequent behavior alerted Facebook, who closed the account down while they worked on the problem. My Facebook account was restored on August 11th, and I am very grateful. Okay, so he was wrong about that. It wasn't because of anything he posted. It's because he actually got hacked, or at least Facebook thought he got hacked. And I just want to point out, like, how could you hack that? I think it was Eli Bosnick at the Scathing Atheist who's like, was Dawkins' password, and someone got in and started taking advantage of it. And like, all Dawkins had to do, I am guessing, I'm speculating here, all he had to do was log on to Facebook, and the first thing he would have seen is your page hacked? Change your password, log in, go through some two-step verification thing so we know it's you, and then we'll give you back your page. And he did none of that. Maybe he forgot that his password was password, and then he changed it to like password 1. And now it's safe and secure, and no one will ever get access to it. So, okay, later on, he said later in this piece, I accept responsibility and publish this to correct the record and apologize, which is good. You want people to apologize for things like that. But I want to go back up one paragraph before that just to finish this thought here. Because no reason was given for the shutdown and no reply to the lawyer's overtures, I'm sorry to say we jumped to the wrong conclusion. And then he explains his conclusion. Might it have some connection with my contemporaneous stand against genetically male boxers fighting women in the Olympics? I then tweeted what turned out to be a false suspicion of Facebook's motives, and I deeply regret this. Back up for a second, buddy. We already know it wasn't because of what you tweeted, but look at what he's saying. Like, are you mad at me because I tweeted that genetically male boxers shouldn't be fighting women? A genetically male boxer was not fighting a woman, which is to say, he's still lying about the trans boxer. He is not correcting the record on the trans boxer. Or I'm sorry, I apologize. He's not correcting the record where he accused that boxer of being trans when she is not. Like, he's not apologizing for the bigger issue here. He's apologizing for his stupid assumption that Facebook was punishing him for that. So, like, he's still, what the hell? How is your whole persona critical thinking, rational thinking, having clarity of mind, and then you make multiple dumb mistakes and only apologize for like the least serious of the problems, right? It's so frustrating. Like, maybe double check what stupid stuff you say before tweeting something out to 3 million plus followers. But again, he's still lying about the boxer. He's still claiming she was trans. She is not. So Dawkins is still being Dawkins. It's very frustrating. And I'm going to get to this in the next story. But listen, if it was just one dude who says stupid shit, okay, there's not much we could do about it. But the Center for Inquiry, one of the largest secular humanist groups in the country, is affiliated with Richard Dawkins. Their foundations merged years ago. So, like, yeah, I'm going to blame CFI for continuing their affiliation with this guy. Why the hell are they working with somebody, lending their credibility and vice versa to a guy who doesn't deserve it? That is also frustrating to me. Okay, gonna pause there. Seriously, Dawkins is so annoying right now. Just spreading all the I think today he tweeted about how Joe Rogan is pretty damn smart. Like, it's just, I'm waiting for the Alex Jones tweet. It's going to come from Dawkins. Like, wow, this guy asks a lot of impressive questions. It's so, what is he doing? I don't know. All right, I'm just looking through to see if I missed anything big. I apologize if I missed something. I know people were asking about Den. I have reached out to Den. I don't know where Den is. I have not heard from Den in a while. Den, for those who don't know, is the person who helps me moderate the threads. So looking, I hope I hear from him soon. Dan, if you see this, I hope you are okay. Okay. I'm going to jump to the next story for the sake of just moving on. And it's not even that far removed from this one. You guys, I have 2 sets of tabs open because of how many dumb things there are to talk about today. Okay. Let me pull this up really quick. All right. Let me continue talking about the Center for Inquiry for a second, because, like I just said a bit ago, the Center for Inquiry is one of the largest, oldest secular humanist organizations in the country. Quick personal story: when I was graduating from college, I was expecting to go to grad school, but I have a summer where I'm not doing anything. And I got a chance to do an internship with the Center for Inquiry. And I'm like, that actually sounds kind of neat. Why does it sound neat? Because I read a lot of the stuff they put out. For those of you who are old, like me, and I'm thinking like 40 or older, we grew up in an age where the internet was relatively new, where if you wanted to learn about atheism, there were not a lot of books written for a lay audience. And I've heard this from a lot of people. The way they discovered atheism, skepticism, is because maybe they went to the library or they went to a bookstore and they saw this magazine on the shelves, Free Inquiry, or maybe Skeptical Inquirer. And they opened up these magazines and started reading them. And they were like, oh my God, this article about secular humanism, or this article questioning pseudoscience, like, it makes sense. This rational thinking, I could get behind this. And that's how they discovered atheism. That's how they discovered secular humanism. And obviously, bookstores kind of gone by and large. Those magazines aren't really in bookstores anymore. They might be. I'm not sure. I haven't seen them in a long time. But those magazines still get published. I don't know how far reaching they are, though, because as someone who covers news regarding church, state, pseudoscience, all that stuff, it's it's been years since I've seen a mainstream news article cite Free Inquiry or Skeptical Inquirer in anything else. Like, I don't think the articles in those magazines reach beyond their subscriber base. And who are the subscribers to those magazines? A lot of really old people, maybe people who gave money to the group a long time ago and totally forgot that like they gave that money. I don't know how many people read the magazine. It's just not that influential anymore, but the magazine still exists. I will say Skeptical Inquirer, I don't really care for articles about like Bigfoot and UFOs anymore, just not that relevant to me. So I don't really read Skeptical Inquirer, but Free Inquiry is still kind of a journal of sorts for thoughts about humanism. Okay, so the Center for Inquiry years ago merged with the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Science and Reason. So these two are in bed together, they work together. And their new CEO, by the way, this is the organization founded by a guy named Paul Kurtz, who was around for decades, one of the founding fathers, if you will, of secular humanism. He passed many, many years ago. And the CEO of the organization now is a woman named Robin Blumner. And so in Free Inquiry, which I think is published 6 times a year, she always has an editorial essay in the magazine. And again, like I said, most of the time these never cross my path, because why would it? No one's talking about it. But I was sent an article, the editorial she wrote for the latest issue of Free Inquiry, and it was so mind-bogglingly bad. That I have to talk about it with you. And I would love to share you screenshots of it. But guess what? Not only is it not available in most bookstores and everywhere, because where are you going to find magazines in a bookstore these days? But it's also hidden behind a paywall. So only subscribers can read it and no one else can read it. So that's not ideal if you're looking to spread ideas about secular humanism. But here's the gist of her article. Like, let me give her the steel man argument of what she's saying. She said, and mind you, you could write an editorial about anything you want. And she's saying, you know what I want to talk about? Racism. She's a white woman. She wants to talk about racism. And her argument is if we want to move past racism, we need to stop being racist. We need to stop seeing race. We need to move toward a color blind society. And if you ever watched the Colbert Report back when Stephen Colbert was playing a character, like a right-wing character, occasionally he would have, let's say, an African-American author that he was interviewing, and he would always joke like, I've heard you're black. I don't know if you're black because I don't see color, but my staff tells me you're black. And that was kind of a running joke because his whole thing is like, well, I don't see race. I'm beyond that. And of course, it's a joke because, of course, racism exists and you can't move past it until you acknowledge it. But I want to share excerpts of Blumner's article with you. And I'm also going to tell you that I wasn't sure I'm the right person to respond to this article. So I spoke with someone named Bakari Shabanu, who is a co-founder of Black Humanists and Non-Believers of Sacramento. He actually wrote a lengthy article responding to what Robin Blumner said. He's actually, if you're on YouTube right now, he is doing an interview with Mandisa Thomas of Black Non-Believers, and their show is called In the Cut. And you can watch their interview where I believe they're talking about his article as well. So those are links for you right there. But I'm going to get to what Bakari wrote and what she said in her piece, okay? Because the whole premise that we just got to find a colorblind society, that's our goal, it's misguided. Because living in a colorblind society and ignoring race means you're ignoring some unique experiences that people have and the struggles that they face under the guise of racial equality. Like, you can't just pretend systemic racism doesn't affect us by ignoring race. So let me share with you one passage from her piece here. And here is the editorial. This is a scanned copy, but you could see there's the editorial from Robin Blumner, Secular Humanism and the Colorblind Society. And I'm going to scroll down to this passage right here. Well, let me see if I can. Color blindness used to be the aspiration of nearly everyone who supported the civil rights movement. It stood in stark contrast to the Black Panther and Nation of Islam approach to Black empowerment that was more segregationist, Black supremacist, and anti-white. See, Martin Luther King and all those guys, they used to push for color blindness. That was their goal. And as Bakari wrote in his response, like, you're totally missing the historical context of those organizations and of those movements because they emerged not to ignore race, but as a response to segregation and white violence and lynching and police brutality and systemic disenfranchisement of Black people. By the way, the Black Panther Party does not espouse Black supremacy. And while the Nation of Islam has preached something like that, their policies have never marginalized white people. So to ignore the historical context for Black resistance to white racism, Bakari writes, like, is ridiculous. You cannot move past racism if you're not acknowledging the historical harm done to Black people and the violence against Black people and the marginalization of Black people. And the two groups that she brought up, Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam, what did they emphasize? Black empowerment, pride in your culture, defense against systemic racism. Like, none of that stuff has ever been anti-white. It's never been about marginalizing white people. It's not reverse racism, right? But she's saying, as a humanist, the biggest obstacle to a colorblind society and racial harmony is apparently what these groups want is black supremacy and a new kind of racism that's anti-white. None of that is true. None of that makes any sense, okay? Um, and then she goes on to say, actually, let me just say, like, what are the goals of the civil rights movement? It wasn't to ignore race, it was to end racial segregation while creating opportunities for marginalized groups to get education, housing, employment, political power, wealth. And you can only do that if marginalized groups have access to these sort of resources that can help them out. And maybe one solution to that is reparations. It's not the only solution, but this is the context in which it comes up. But Robin Blumner writes that whatever racism existed in the past just doesn't exist anymore. And this is such a wild passage right here. Look at this. Most white people in the United States these days are not racist. Pause for a second. She capitalizes white, which is a choice, which is a very weird, weird choice. Most white people in the US today these days are not racist. I say these days in 2024. You can point backward to a different reality. There are still racists, of course, but in general, we have excised that demon as we have sloughed off other old prejudices, such as that women shouldn't work outside the home or that LGBTQ people shouldn't legally marry each other. See, guys, no one is anti-woman anymore, no one's anti-LGBTQ, and no one's racist. Not really. Then she says, we have made stunning progress, shifting all those attitudes within my lifetime, a cause for unbridled celebration, especially among humanists, many of whom were at the forefront of these civil rights struggles. First, let's back up to how's this? That women shouldn't work outside the home. This is literally a discussion about things J.D. Vance has been saying this week. We are not past that because there are people who want to take us back to women working inside the homes, bearing children, and having no other options if they don't want those. And this idea that, we're good on LGBTQ issues these days, that's not true. Obergefell could very well be overturned. Trans people have to fight for their own existence. And oh my God, Robin Blumner, you work with Richard Dawkins, who is one of the most anti-trans voices across the globe. What the hell are you talking? See, we moved past that by and large. You're part of the problem. So, did you know that most white people these days are not racist? This is news to me. I don't know what she's citing. There's no footnote attached to that. It's just the way it is, which again, I'm not black. I can't necessarily speak to this. The racism I experience is very different from the racism black people experience. But I'm guessing there's a lot of racism out there, and a lot of it comes from white people. Sorry, it happens. That's the way it is. And look, even if most white people are not racist, racism permeates the actions of many of the most powerful white people in the country. Just look at the Republican Party. Look at what they talk about. Look at the policies they promote. Who is pushing against teaching people critical race theory? Those are conservatives who don't want people learning about our nation's history of slavery. Who's using woke as a dog whistle against black people and other marginalized groups, right? Like, those people are out there in spades. So for all the progress that has been made, and yeah, there has been progress made, the obstacles tend to be created by the same sort of people who perpetuate racism, right? That is not necessarily individual prejudice. It is not some dude wearing a white cone hat. It's systemic. And that's why addressing the problem of racism requires understanding racism and then dismantling the structure that props up racism. And the one person who has maybe been most famous at trying to do that is a man named Ibram Kendi. And of course, Robin Blumner has something to say about Ibram X. Kendi, okay? Let me show you this passage right here where we get introduced to a new term. For the identitarian left, the liberals who play identity politics, for the identitarian left, this is truly a Humpty Dumpty moment when words mean what they say they mean. I don't know what any of that means. If you are not racially discriminatory toward white people, according to Ibram X. Kendi, a godparent of the identitarian left, you are racist. And then she quotes Kendi saying, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination, Kendi wrote in words that would be softened in a future edition after they became the subject of criticism. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. In other words, two wrongs do make a right. Listen, we can put this in context because it's not that hard to do. What Kendi is basically saying is that if you want to address racist discrimination in the past, you cannot just pretend it doesn't exist. If you could wave a wand and just end racism today, it would not make up for the legacy of racism and slavery in our past. I think that's pretty obvious, right? Even if racism was gone, think about the inequality in all sorts of ways that has been built up over time because of how racist our society has been. If you want to go down a rabbit hole that you've never gone down, look up redlining and see the legacy of that. You know what I mean? So, what Kendi was saying is if you want to remedy racist discrimination in the past, you have to do anti-racist discrimination, which is his poetic, in a way of arguing that you need proactively to pass measures to make up for all those losses. You can't just pretend racism is gone. You have to undo it. And again, I mentioned reparations. That's one possible solution. But at the same time, you got to favor marginalized groups. You need policies that give a leg up to people who have been historically pushed down, right? You can't rectify the wrongs of the past by just pretending they don't exist. That's what he was trying to say. But Robin Blumner is saying, see, he wants discrimination against whites. That's not at all what he was saying. He's not pushing for like reverse racism. That's not true. But giving marginalized groups a leg up, that is a necessary step, Kendi says, to dismantling, racial and economic injustice. So think about this: unequal education gaps, discriminatory housing. This is what Bakari was writing. High incarceration rates, class oppression. You can't undo that by just pretending to live in a colorblind society. You need policies that help the people who have been victims of those things in the past. Okay, so one argument against all that Robin Blumner points out is that, look, some Black people have become really successful. That's it. That is the extent of her argument. And this may be the most mind-boggling passage in an entire essay full of dumb shit. Okay? Wait for it. What do you think she's going to say? What do you think she's going to say? Okay. How to do that, address racial inequality, how to do that best and most effectively, however, is not to double down on the enfeebling notion that every Black person is a victim of a systemically racist society, and under those circumstances, their lot is to be oppressed and downtrodden, especially because reality says differently. All right, let's get to it. We have a current Black vice president. We have Kamala. Racism is over, you guys. You know what? We had a Black president once, too. That cured racism. She says we have a Secretary of Defense, yes, Ambassador to the United Nations, Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices. As these examples, and thousands like them demonstrate, in today's America, people can largely succeed irrespective of their race. Oh my God, she just cited Clarence Thomas as proof that if you're Black, you can still do anything. She cited the most famous white supremacist in the country as proof that Black people can do anything. Because, yeah, Clarence Thomas is the most powerful white supremacist in the country. And I know you've heard the word token before. Having a successful person or two from a marginalized group that makes it somehow doesn't mean everything is okay. Because when the door opens, as many of those tokens or successful minorities could tell you, if you've been able to break through the door, or if you've been able to get through the door, your job, your obligation, if you will, is to hold it open for everyone else behind you so that they can get in. Because it's a horrible person who, like Clarence Thomas, who shuts that door behind him, right? And she also points out, like, we have two black Supreme Court justices. You know why we have a black Supreme Court? You know why we have Ketanji Brown Jackson? Because Joe Biden said, if you elect me president, I will absolutely appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. Like, because no one else was going to just do that on their own. He made a promise to do it, and he kept that promise. Like, and she's great. But again, that doesn't mean every black person just has it that easy. Not that her journey was easy, you know what I mean? But like, having black people or any marginalized group, having members of that group in a position of power doesn't mean racism is over. It doesn't. Ask anybody who knows what they're talking about. Okay. And then you go back to the actual systemic issues, like what about pay gaps and education gaps? And what about neighborhoods? Majority black neighborhoods look very different from majority white neighborhoods. You know what I mean? You could go down the line of how it's still harder to be a person of color in this society than it is to be a white person. Doesn't mean all white people have it easy either. But you get the idea. Like, you can't just say there's some successful black people, so I don't know why you all think racism exists. Just utterly stupid thinking here. What was the next dumb thing she said? Oh, she also brought up the Supreme Court decision from a very right-wing Supreme Court last year that basically ended the practice of affirmative action at selective colleges. And here's what she says about that. Let me make sure. There we go. A Gallup poll from fall 2023 found that nearly 7 in 10 Americans, mostly white, thought the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling curtailing affirmative action in college admissions was mostly a good thing, including 52% of black Americans. Why? Because to people of goodwill, admitting people to elite universities based largely on one's race puts an unfortunate asterisk on the academic careers of those admitted through an unfair process. It harms the very people it purports to help. She makes it sound like when affirmative action existed, Harvard would look at your application and say, oh, this person is black? Well, I guess that does it. Just let them in. That's not at all how it worked. Like, listen, I don't have much love for like Ivy League institutions necessarily, and not just because they rejected me, but how do those colleges work? They say, we do want to bring in a diverse group of Americans because that's good for the entire campus. So what can we do? Well, we could take race into account, and they did, and that's what the Supreme Court said they can't do. But there's a lot of other things they could do. They could just say, we're not going to weigh test scores as heavily. We will look at your zip code, because that tells us a lot about how much money was in your neighborhood and the opportunities you had. We could look at what you did with your time, your family, how much money you make. Like, you could take all that stuff into account and get a holistic sense of where this student is coming from. Because as Bakari mentioned in his piece, if you are a black person who you may be a really strong student, capable of doing so much more, but if you come from a neighborhood where the ceiling was relatively low, it may not look that great on paper. So with affirmative action and by taking race into account, you're saying, you haven't had the opportunities, but man, do you have potential. And we're seeing that holistically looking at your application. Let's bring you in. So this idea that elite colleges, as she was saying, that it'll put an asterisk next to your name. No, it won't, because these people weren't getting admitted just because they were black. Like, they got in on merit. They're not getting in there because they're black and stupid, because they wouldn't survive at a school like that. No one would. They're getting in because they haven't necessarily had the opportunities of other students, and yet they thrived regardless. And these schools might say, let's give this kid a chance. And that's what you want to see from an elite institution. But then I looked at the study she mentioned there, the Gallup poll that said, most Americans were fine with the Supreme Court's ruling, including 52% of Black Americans. Well, guess what happens when I look at the poll that here she is. Here is the Black adults, 52% of them say the Supreme Court's decision was a mostly good thing. But guess what? If you scroll down here, I'm going to get rid of this banner at the bottom. If you scroll down, look at this. What impact do you think the Supreme Court's decision will have on higher education in the US? And if you look at Black adults in the blue, right over there, you know where I'm pointing, right over there. Look at this. Only 33% of Black adults say it'll be good, mostly slightly positive impact. 50% say, oh, this is going to be bad. Like, they know. And then look down here. As a result of this decision, do you think it'll be easier or harder for applicants of your race or ethnicity to attend college? 52% of Black adults say, yeah, much harder, slightly harder. Like, they're not thrilled about it. But think about what they would ask. The poll might say, do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision to get rid of affirmative action? If you don't know the nuance of everything I just told you, it's really tempting to say, well, yes, I don't think affirmative action is a good thing. I think everyone should be judged on merit, and so we don't need affirmative action. Like, that sounds pretty damn good when you don't understand how these schools are admitting students, when you don't understand why race might be taken into account. So it's not surprising that even a slight majority of Black adults say it's a good thing, because when you dig into, is it going to help you get into college? No. Is it good for your future? Not really. Like, they know. They know. God, this essay is so bad. Okay, I got, here's another section from her. Oh, let me show you this. I found this too. This is from the Pew Research Center. This was not related to the Supreme Court's decision, but they just said, the question is the percentage of people who believe selective colleges and universities taking race and ethnicity into account in admissions decisions in order to increase the racial and ethnic diversity at the school. Who supports that? Who approves or disapproves of it? And look at Black Americans here. Right over here. Black Americans, 47% said, yeah, take my race into account. It's a good thing. 29% say don't. So you have a much larger group of Black Americans saying, I'm fine with affirmative action when you phrase it like this. And right above my head here, you could see 24% of them weren't sure. Fine. But like, it depends on what you're looking at, how you're asking the question. Here was another section of her Robin Blumner's essay. She cites a book by, I think, a Black conservative named Coleman Hughes. And she says, Coleman Hughes makes a compelling case for a far more empowering, motivating, and fair approach to how race should be viewed in social policy in his important new book, The End of Race Politics: Arguments for a Colorblind Society. His thesis is that aspiring to a colorblind society where race is made as irrelevant as possible is not only good for societal peace and cohesiveness, but it is demonstrably good for Black Americans. It is far better than the identitarian left's prescription of exhaustively injecting race consciousness into every crevice of our lives. You guys, noticing race is so hard for this white woman writing the piece. You're trying to make me be conscious of race? How could you? It's so exhausting for her. You know what? Racism is really exhausting for victims of racism. I don't know. Maybe think about that. She also pointed this out in the same section. One interesting poll Hughes cites in a 2013 Gallup survey asking Blacks in the US the following question. On the average, Blacks have worse jobs, income, and housing than whites. Do you think this is mostly due to discrimination against Blacks, or is it mostly due to something else? Fully 60% of Blacks answered something else, meaning a solid majority did not think racism was the primary cause of disparities in life outcomes. Contrary to the identitarian left's insistence, it's not fetch. Stop trying to make fetch a thing. Stop saying that. Okay, anyway. This idea that, like, why do you think black people have worse jobs, income, and housing? And this survey says your choices are discrimination or something else. Listen, I don't know what poll she's referring to, but you can make the argument that what is racism? For some people, if you're not wearing a white hood, it's not racism, right? If you're not actively saying, I'm doing this because I don't like black people, it's not racism. But again, the history of racism in the United States is not just singling out black people or people of color because it's overt. It's that overt. It's doing it in other ways. It's saying, you know what? We're not going to let you rent houses in this area. We're not going to let you get a bank loan in this part of the city. Like, is that discriminatory against race? Maybe not on the surface, but that's certainly the impact of it. So this idea that 60% said something else may include racism, but not with people in white hoods. You know what I mean? Racism permeates all these aspects of society. So to pretend otherwise, as Robin Blumner does, is ridiculous. There was one more section I wanted to show you. This is toward the end of the piece, I think. Yeah, here's this last section, kind of summarizing her whole point. It's underlined here. You don't bring a diversity of people together by dividing them by skin color or making skin color an essential qualification or disqualification for life's rewards. You bring them together by making racial distinctions as irrelevant as humanly possible, which is what color blindness means. It does not mean we are blind to skin color. It means we do our best to treat people equally without regard to it. And that sounds very nice, but that's not how anything works. And by the way, since when do we reward people just because of their skin color? How warped does your brain have to be to think, oh, that person only got the job because they're black? Like, what? You don't think they also have skills to bring to the table? I'm so done with this person. Ignoring racism, as she wants to do, is not going to fix racism. Adopting colorblindness sounds nice, but it doesn't fix our history, the traditions of the United States that were bad traditions and we need to address. As Bakari wrote in his essay, we have to acknowledge intersectionality, which values diverse experiences and fosters empathy and understanding. And when we acknowledge what our past was like and we work to fix that, sometimes taking proactive measures to make it easier for people who have been hurt in the past, that is the way we get to a level of equity. That's the way we get to an equal playing field. And you would think a spokesperson, the president of an organization promoting secular humanism, would know that better than anybody, because you have facts at the table, you have people who respect history and science and hopefully understands the pitfalls of both of those. You would think they would want to celebrate diversity and advocate for social justice, economic justice, educational justice, political justice. And what's Robin Blumner's thesis here? Let's just ignore it all. Just forget it. If you say the word black, you're wrong. Like, just pretend it doesn't exist. It's such a thoughtless piece. And I know most people are not going to see this, unfortunately, but this is what the Center for Inquiry is promoting. You can't even pretend this is Richard Dawkins acting on his own and he has a tangential connection to this organization. This is the president of the organization speaking on its behalf. This is an editorial under her name in her magazine. Like, this is what the group represents. By the way, if you look up Center for Inquiry's board of directors, not a single woman on the list. It's the only atheist humanist organization I know that somehow doesn't have one woman on the board of directors. And apparently no black people editing the pieces in the magazine, clearly. What the hell is wrong with these people? It's so frustrating. Okay, again, I encourage you, if not to read Robin's piece, go check out Bakari's piece. The link will be in the show notes underneath this clip. I'm done with this, you guys. All right, I'm going to look at questions. What else we got here? I apologize if I missed anything along the way. I know you're writing so many things, and I'm skipping so much of that. This is from Spencer here. Like I said earlier, a colorblind society is a great idea for an end goal, but it's extremely irresponsible and naive to just jump to that end goal without going through the extremely lengthy process. Absolutely. Like, you have to work to fix the problem. And that's the sort of history that so many conservatives don't want students to learn in school. They call it critical race theory because they don't want students learning about our racist history. It's very frustrating. What else am I missing here? Just looking through as fast as I can to look at any commentary. Man, you guys had a long discussion without me here. All right, I apologize if I'm missing stuff. Vanessa makes a good point here. The problem is that in order to understand systemic problems, you need critical thinking. That's why conservatives are up in arms trying to destroy education and turn schools into indoctrination centers. Yep, couldn't agree more. Anything else here? I'm going to scroll back down. All right, let me pull up the next story. I'm going to move to my second batch of tabs. I figure I owe you a good story, so I'll do a nice one next. All right, here we go. All right, I'm moving to a different story here. TC Dan, I see your question. I'm going to save it for the interim after the next one. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to 2015 in Texas, because inside the Texas state capitol that year, they had one of those open forums where any group can sign the paperwork to put up a display in the rotunda. And there was a nativity scene there. No big deal. Open forum. Some Christian group applied for it. That's not weird. Okay. At the same time, the Freedom from Religion Foundation said, well, if it's an open forum, we have a display we would like to see in the Texas state capitol. And this is what they ended up putting there. If I can show you this. Look at this beautiful thing. It is a secular nativity. That right there in the manger would be the Bill of Rights. And who do we have here? We have the Statue of Liberty, flanked by Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington. As far as arts goes, all right, whatever. They also, next to it, had a small sign that said this: Happy winter solstice. At this season of the winter solstice, we adopt reason and the Bill of Rights. Keep state and church separate, placed by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So that display and that disclaimer were up in the Texas state capitol because, again, open forum, they filled out the paperwork, they jumped through all the necessary hoops, they were allowed to have it there. The only way you could get rid of it is by shutting down the entire forum. No Christian nativity, no other displays. That's the only legal way you could shut that thing down. But in 2015, Governor Greg Abbott said, I don't like the atheist group's display. And also, he's a Republican in Texas who thinks he can do whatever the hell he wants. And so he decided 3 days after that secular nativity went up, and just a couple days before Christmas, he's like, let's just take down the atheist display. Just remove it. So he wrote a letter to the guy in charge of the displays, and he wrote this insane letter. Let me share this with you here. This insane letter to John Sneed, the executive director of the State Preservation Board. And he basically says, I see that this display is here, but it should come down for the following reasons. First, far from promoting morals and the general welfare, the atheist exhibit deliberately mocks Christians and Christianity. How did it mock anything? It was a nativity. They had a little thing to rest the Bill of Rights on. And also, where in the rules did it say all displays have to promote morality and the general welfare? It did not. He just made that up out of thin air, pretended to be persecuted, and that was reason number one for why it had to come down. Reason number two, second, the exhibit does not educate, which, by the way, also not a rule. Not a rule that an exhibit has to educate. Though, if anything, I would argue that having the Bill of Rights there and the founding fathers and the Statue of Liberty, I would say that gets pretty damn close to educating people, or at least encouraging them to look up who the hell those people are, right? And then what the hell does the nativity scene teach you if education is part of the goal? Like, what do you learn from looking at the baby Jesus in a manger? Other than if you don't accept this thing as your God, you're going to suffer in hell for all of eternity. So, what is he talking about? The exhibit does not educate. Then we get this, like, to the contrary, the exhibit promotes ignorance and falsehood because it suggests that Washington, Franklin, and Jefferson worshipped the Bill of Rights instead of Jesus. That's not at all what that display was saying, but you do you. And then he says, to take just one example, consider this passage from George Washington's prayer journal. And basically, Greg Abbott is saying, look, George Washington loved God. He writes about God in his journal. He would not worship the Bill of Rights. And he says, those are hardly the words of a man who would think of a document, however important it is, as a substitute for faith in God. No one was making that argument. But you could even see at the bottom in this footnote, like, see, William Jackson Johnstone, George Washington, the Christian, a book written in 1919. Guess what? This is from The Humanist. George Washington never wrote that Jesus prayer. It's not even a real thing. It's a work of fiction that someone posted. I don't know. It's not important. But Greg Abbott is literally pointing to something George Washington never did to point out the ignorance of the atheists for having George Washington in their display. Like, this guy is really dumb. And what was the third thing he said? Greg Abbott says, third, the general public does not have a direct interest in the Freedom from Religion Foundation's purpose. Their organization is hostile to religion, and why would the public like that? Why does the public need a direct interest in what FFRF does? That's not a rule. I don't have a direct interest in the Christian display. Whoever put that up, who cares? It doesn't matter. If it's an open forum, everyone gets to play. That's how this works. Okay, so that's what Greg Abbott sent this dude in 2015 saying, take down the atheist display. They're not allowed to have it up there. And unfortunately, it worked. It worked. This is what FFRF posted back at the time. Texas governor orders FFRF Bill of Rights display removed from Capitol. Greg Abbott got the whole thing removed illegally because he just didn't like it. I mean, very Streisand effect here, right? If he hadn't said anything, no one would have noticed that display was there. But because he made a big deal of it, because his whole thing is stoking culture war battles, it became this huge thing. Well, in 2015, or actually early 2016, the Freedom from Religion Foundation decided to file a lawsuit about it. Like, they filed a lawsuit against Greg Abbott in his official and individual capacities, along with that dude he wrote the letter to, saying they illegally took down our display. That violates our First Amendment rights, constitutional rights, what have you. It also violated, I think, Texas law. So good for them. They were right to file a lawsuit against all of that. That was February of 2016. FFRF said this was viewpoint discrimination. So I'm not going to bore you with all the legal details here. Abbott tried to get the lawsuit tossed out of court. It didn't work. Federal judge said, no, we're going to move forward with this case. And you know what? By 2017, the judge said FFRF was right. They did have every right to have their display up in that space. And then Greg Abbott appealed the decision. And guess what? The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is generally very conservative, but even they were like, yeah, you can't remove that display from the Capitol. So they send it down to a lower court judge. Like, this takes years. I am skipping past years of legal battles here. But eventually, all the courts that looked at this said what Greg Abbott did was wrong. FFRF had every right to be there. And earlier in, was it 2023? Like, it was recently that a judge finally ruled in maybe early this year, this is over. Everyone's looked at this. Greg Abbott has lost. FFRF wins. All we have to figure out is how much Greg Abbott owes the atheists. And the reason I tell you this story this week is because FFRF posted an update recently Check out this. Greg Abbott and Texas pay $358,000 in attorney's fees in their Bill of Rights case. The check came through. Although FFRF won the lawsuit with the judgment by the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals last year, disputes and delaying tactics by the governor held up the required attorney fees and costs, totaling all that money, which were received this week. Half of it, roughly, reimburses FFRF for staff attorney time. The other half goes to other attorneys who are working on this case. So Greg Abbott finally accepted defeat and paid this money. Now, the outstanding question remains, whose money are we talking here? It didn't come out of Greg Abbott's pocket. Is this Texas taxpayers' money that is being wasted because Greg Abbott decided to, take down a display that he had no business taking down? I don't have a definitive answer to that, but it sure seems like that's what happened, that Texas taxpayers are on the hook because they elected the dumbest possible Republican governor they could find, who only wants to fight culture war battles instead of, I don't know, doing anything useful, fixing their power grid, I don't know, doing whatever it is needs to be done in Texas. It is a huge victory for church-state separation. And again, will it get more news? Like, Greg Abbott is counting on him taking down the display to make news, but him having to pay the price for acting a fool. He's expecting that's not going to make any news, which is why he keeps doing shit like this. That's true for a lot of conservatives in power. So I don't know if that matters, but he had to pay up. He lost. The church-state separation crowd won this battle. All right, just scrolling through to see if there's anything here. This was an interesting question from TC Dan. How concerned are you about the 2024 presidential election at this point? I wish you could narrow down that question a little bit. I am so on the Kamala Harris Tim Walz train right now. Like, it's a good pairing. It's a good two very good candidates. If Democrats want to win, they're in position to get the votes that they need, while Donald Trump's and JD Vance are both like imploding on the campaign because they don't know what to do right now. So presidential side, cautiously optimistic, but remember that Donald Trump doesn't think he even has to win an election anymore. He just needs to make sure that his people are the ones in charge of counting the votes, so they could just dismiss the ones they don't like. That part does worry me, because I don't know that Democrats are going to win by so much that it becomes obvious that they win, because if it's a close election, Republicans are going to find a way to complain and whine and pretend like they won, even though they didn't, because that's kind of their whole thing now. They've been doing it for years. That part scares me. In terms of the House races, Democrats are a long way from winning the House, but the trends are moving in the right direction. So I'm hopeful that things will keep getting better as the weeks progress. What I am worried about is the Senate, because Democrats can only afford to lose like one seat, and they've already lost that seat in West Virginia. Like, I don't like Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin was a Democrat. He's gone. A Republican's going to replace him. And there are two Democrats in Montana and Ohio who are in really tough races in red states. And if they lose their seats, Democrats lose the Senate majority, which means you're not going to see Supreme Court justices replacing any of the current ones. You're not going to see any judges get nominated and approved. The same is true for any cabinet position that needs approval, because Republicans will just form a block to stop all that shit. So that part does scare me. I am worried about that. I'm hopeful, though, that as the campaign continues, the Democrats will find a way to raise the tides enough that it kind of carries some of those Senate candidates to victory. But a lot of work needs to be done. Listen, if you donate, you don't need to donate to Kamala Harris. Donate to state reps, donate to state senators, donate to those Senate races, things like that, where it could actually make a bigger difference. If you don't have money, volunteer for the campaigns, go knock on doors, knock on your neighbors' doors, canvass. There are always groups helping you sign up to do that stuff. Work as an election worker. There's so many ways you could help out, but this is one of those things that we need people coming together to do. Um, I saw this also. I'm thrilled that Ilhan Omar won her primary. Yeah, she won it fairly comfortably, and there were right wing groups really going after other members of the squad, and they already knocked out 2 of them. So I'm grateful that Omar won her seat. Um, so again, am I concerned? Yeah, I'm a cynical person, but I don't know. I haven't felt these types of political vibes since 2008, and that feels like a lifetime ago. Okay, I'm gonna. Sorry if I missed any big questions. Let me see what I can pull up here. Okay, you're gonna. I'll give you another happy, fun one. I think you will enjoy this. Give me 1 second to pull this up. Yes, here we go. All right. So you may have seen that on the campaign trail, one of the ways people have been criticizing Republicans is by calling them weird. And if you are JD Vance or you're any of the weird Republicans, then the way you would want to fight back against charges of being weird is maybe not being so damn weird. And the people on the Christian right have not gotten that memo. Because it turns out there's a TV show called Flashpoint. I'm going to show you a picture of their website right now, but this is Flashpoint, and it airs on Kenneth Copeland's Victory channel. And look at the highlighted part right here. Look at their tagline: "Tackling topics that mainstream media does not," which I'm pretty sure is also the tagline for InfoWars. But okay, so this is just one of their like news shows that just covers Christian stuff, and what happened this week is that their host, the host of this show, his name is Gene Bailey. He wanted to tell his audience that he was going to bring on a special guest, someone he's never had on before. And that guy's name is Joseph Z. Just the letter Z. Man doesn't have a last name, just has a last letter. Good luck trying to go Google him now. You will not find his last name. So Gene Bailey says, I'm going to bring up Joseph Z. And he actually goes out of his way to say, we vet everyone we bring to talk to you, but we're especially careful when we bring on men of God because the standard's a little higher. So I'm going to show you what Gene says introducing Joseph Z. And then I want you to listen to what Joseph Z says about the Democrats currently running for president and vice president. And the question was really simple. What Gene Bailey asked Joseph Z is, are you encouraged or discouraged by where America is these days? And I'll give you a hint. If you're one of these people, all you have to say is, well, I'm very discouraged. And I'm discouraged because of, and then list off your reasons. That is not what Joseph Z says. Okay, if you don't know where I'm going with this, let me play the clip for you and enjoy yourself. Enjoy it.
Here at Flashpoint, we take what we put on the air, we take very seriously. And who we put on the air, we take seriously as well. But that comes even more so when it comes to men of the cloth and prophets. Are you encouraged or discouraged about where America is right now?
Even when we bring up guys like Tim Waltz and you're looking at what's going on, people say he's, Midwestern folksy. I have another word for him, being from Minnesota myself. And it's weird. The guy's just weird. You see the way he hugs his wife. You see the way he does everything. And, it's interesting how the spirit of Antichrist just loves to pick these people that fit right in with the wicked overlord lizard mafia that is really driven by their goblin masters. And when you're looking at this, I believe that's exactly what we're facing right now.
Wicked overlord lizard mafia. That is what he used to describe Tim Walz, the most boring, down-to-earth, normal politician you will ever see. And also, all of you have goblin masters, which, news to me. I don't know which one of you is my goblin master, but I'm just saying, if you want to push back against the weird allegations, you're not helping your cause. And by the way, in case you're wondering, Gene Bailey did not ask any follow-ups. He just moved on to the next question. He just skipped over it. These are the same people who flip out over people playing Dungeons and Dragons, But Joseph Z over here is like, it's the lizard mafia. And everyone's like, yeah, totally. We're Christians. We know how that shit works. Which is too bad because I really wanted to know who is involved in this lizard mafia. And it also gave me an excuse to play the greatest clip from any Christian show I have ever seen in my life. And it's been, I don't know, a couple of years since I've gotten to play this. And it's a longer clip, but man, is it good stuff. This is another lady talking about reptiles. You get no introduction other than this is on Jim Bakker's show. He's the scam evangelist from the 80s, but she's on his show, and this lady's going to tell you all about the lizards. Enjoy.
After Derek and I got married, one night, this other Derek appears in our bed. The real Derek is lying down next to me. Other Derek sits right up out of him. It startled me. I knew that was not Derek. And so I asked this critter, "Who are you?" Because he clearly wanted to have sexual relations. And he said, "Come on, I'm your husband." I said, "Who are you?" And he had the nerve to claim to be Ahasuerus, Xerxes. Well, other Derek seriously wanted to invite me to use my free will to do something that was going to pull me away from God. So this last time, I knew he was really desperate. And I asked him again, "Who are you?" He told me the same answer, and I said, "I am not going with you." This was an internal dialogue. Finally, I said, "I've had enough." In my mind, I reached up. I grabbed his face, and I said, "You are a liar, and Jesus is real." And I pulled that face off, and beneath it was a reptile. And he had little creatures with him this time. He brought these little halfling creatures, and they looked like, I don't know, gargoyles. They were very reptilian as well. So beneath that face of Derek was a reptilian serpentine creature, probably similar to what was visiting the Anasazi.
Wow.
Well, the Bible says.
Wow. God, I missed that clip. Such a good clip. They all think lizard mafias are taking over everything. Listen, I want to mock that first clip with Joseph Z, but here's the scary thing about Flashpoint. Flashpoint is not just some random show, even if no one's ever heard of it. Right Wing Watch has written about it extensively. The show, as they said, provides a steady platform for MAGA, Christian nationalist propaganda and conspiracy theories, and they did it even on the night of January 6th, 2021. Like, Donald Trump himself has been interviewed by Gene Bailey more than once. And the show also promotes rallies where they teach Christians how to take over public school boards. So, like, we can make fun of this stuff all we want, but these people have power. It's dangerous. The people who believe in lizard mafias trying to have sexual relations with them are also trying to take over your local school districts. Like, these people are batshit crazy, but also they give me an excuse to show you these clips. So there you go. That I think is it for that story. Okay, I'm gonna whip through a couple more here. Do I owe you another happy story? I think I do owe you a happy story. Oh no, I don't. I got to show you this. I don't even know if I'm gonna post this later, but I'm gonna go ahead. Listen, I talked earlier about Kirk Cameron and the crazy things he said, but we can't just stop there because there's another TV star from like the 90s who also said something insane. I don't even know that I have commentary on this. I just want to show you what he said so you're aware of it. This is from Kevin Sorbo, aka Hercules in the TV series, aka the professor from the original God's Not Dead. And you may have seen Donald Trump question how black Kamala Harris is. Well, Kevin Sorbo has a way that she can prove she's really black. And I will give you 2 more seconds to figure out where you think he's going with this. Because, yeah, he said it. Here you go. If Kamala really is black, have her say the N word. Let the people decide for themselves. Which may be the most insane way of trying to prove someone's blackness. Like, you have to be messed up in the head to say, like, well, if she's really black, just have her say what we say in my house all the time. And then maybe we'll believe. And then what? What if she did say it, Kevin? Then what? What do you think would happen if she did? How are the people going to suddenly decide? They're going to listen to how hard the R sound is and what? Base their votes on that? I do not understand ignorant white racist thinking. I'm going to need one of you to explain what he's trying to say here because I haven't quite figured it out. I do appreciate some of the responses underneath that comment. It's a Thursday evening. You could be doing anything right now, Kevin. What is your obsession with that word? We should have you say the word celebrity and let the people decide. Oh, people had a field day with this, as they should, because what the hell is wrong with conservatives? But wait, there's one more as well, because you all are familiar with Kent Hovind, the creationist who's not Ken Ham, and who also was in jail for, scams of various kinds. Well, his son's name is Eric Hovind. Eric Hovind is also a creationist, but that's not that important for the purpose of this tweet. But he basically shared a story on Twitter, a video, where I don't know where the video clip is coming from, but it shows a 10-year-old girl and an interviewer. And the interviewer is saying, like, tell me about yourself. And the girl says she's married. And then the interviewer brings on her husband, who is in his 30s. And this clip goes on for a while. And it's like, well, that's messed up for obvious reasons. And I'm not going to play you that clip because it gets long, but I did want to show you what Eric Hovind wrote. Because I think that is crazy. If love is love, then what's wrong with this? Genuinely curious how anyone in the LGBTQAI, that's not how it goes, plus movement sees this. And listen, this is a one-word answer. We have all agreed as a society that children do not consent to sex, to marriage. There is no love marriage happening here. This is sexual assault, for lack of a better word. And again, I'm not justifying this video. I don't know anything about this video. I am shocked that Hovind doesn't understand the difference between two adult men who might want to have a relationship together consensually and this girl being married to some older dude. And Eric Hovind's like, come on, what's wrong with this? The answer is obvious. And it's 2024. Like, we've been having this discussion about the slippery slope thing, because what were the arguments people made against marriage equality? Well, if two men can get married, then what's stopping a man from marrying his pet? Right? Like those stupid arguments that I'm sure, well, a lot of people made back in the day, and I'm sure some people still do. But those arguments are dumb because the answer is so obvious. The two people ought to be able to consent. A child cannot. If he doesn't know that, what the hell is going on in his church, at the school he works at among the Christians he congregates with? Like, what the hell that you don't know the answer, that you felt the need to tweet that shit out? And then, to someone's credit, someone actually raised that point to him, and look at this exchange. Children cannot consent. Why is consent always so hard for theists to understand? To which Hovind responds, she seems pretty consenting, if you ask me. Which, oh my God, that's the creepiest ass thing you could possibly say right there. And then he says, is there another standard of morality you are appealing to? Because yours fails here. Oh, dear God. Listen, I've met Eric. When we're not talking about religion, and I can say this for a lot of people, when we're not talking about religion, he's a perfectly fine, normal person. I've enjoyed my interactions with him. But when he says stuff like this, in the name of Jesus, because the argument he's trying to make is there is no morality without Jesus, and there is a set standard that's in the Bible, and you're not following it. Therefore, anything goes. So, what the hell is wrong with this thing that is clearly wrong? I think that's where he's trying to go with this. But the way he is making that point is insane. And it just perpetuates this idea that these guys don't they don't think children are capable of consent. It's the same argument they sometimes make with women in marriage, where it's like, well, she can't get divorced because God doesn't like divorce. And then this woman is like, well, my husband is physically abusing me. I should be able to leave that relationship. And some pastors are like, that's not what God wants. You're stuck in this forever because you pledged your soul to him for eternity. Like, sometimes you have to look beyond Christian morality because it's not actually very good. I was also going to show you the Kirk Cameron thing in this section, but I realized, you know what? These are ones we could talk about separately. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm just looking through any comments to see what I am missing here. I mean, yes, you speak for all of us right there, Spencer. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Why are these people so effing creepy? I don't know, but I don't want to go to church, and they're not really convincing me that I should. What the hell? It's getting late, and this stuff is still messed up. This is interesting too. Thank you for bringing this up. Back to Kevin Sorbo. So Kamala can only be black if she has the N-word pass? Like, should we tell these idiots that not all black people like or condone the use of the N-word? I'm sorry, Vanessa. You're using something called nuance, and that's not allowed in Kevin Sorbo's circles. How dare you bring up that to counter his point? Oh my God. All right. I'm going to move on. All right, I did have a good news story I wanted to share with you. I swear I'm almost done. There's just a lot of shit we need to discuss this week, all right? But I'm getting close to the end, I promise. Maybe I'll save one for next week, okay? Yeah, let me do one final story for today. I'll save the other one for next week. This is actual good news. In Oklahoma, I've made videos on this before, and I don't want to rehash everything, but you may remember that in the state of Oklahoma, there was a Catholic school that wanted to function as a public charter school, which means they wanted public money to run their Catholic school. It was called St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School. And Ryan Walters, the Christian nationalist guy in charge of public instruction there, basically helped them get the approval they needed. And that led to lawsuits. And we were all trying to figure out, well, like, the school year's starting now. It's middle of August. So what's going to happen with this place? And this week, some good news here is that, check out this headline right here. Oklahoma statewide charter school board rescinds St. Isidore contract. And just look at this first paragraph. The Oklahoma statewide charter school board voted unanimously Monday to rescind the contract for what would be the nation's first publicly funded religious school. They ripped up the contract between them and the Catholic school, which is great, but it took so much to get there, okay? Let me talk a little bit about that. Conservatives have been pushing for a long time, and in many states, to use public money to fund private education. And private education usually means Christian education. And in many states, it goes by the word vouchers. They use different terms in different states. But this particular contract between the state of Oklahoma and this virtual charter school, it was actually shot down by the Oklahoma Supreme Court earlier in June. I think we talked about it back then. And I just want to share with you what the Oklahoma Supreme Court majority said at the time. Just read through this with me because it's really interesting. Under Oklahoma law, a charter school is a public school. As such, a charter school must be non-sectarian. However, St. Isidore will evangelize the Catholic faith as part of the school curriculum while sponsored by the state. This is so like building blocks here. This state's establishment of a religious charter school violates Oklahoma statutes, the Oklahoma Constitution, and the Establishment Clause. St. Isidore cannot justify its creation by invoking free exercise rights as a religious entity. St. Isidore came into existence through its charter with the state and will function as a component of the state's public school system. This case turns on the state's contracted for religious teachings and activities through a new public charter school, not the state's exclusion of a religious entity. So basically, what the court said is you don't get to function. This is illegal. So the Supreme Court of Oklahoma voted, was it 7-1? 7-1 to block the state from opening up this charter school. And what happened after that? It's kind of amazing. Ryan Walters is like, well, don't worry. You can say whatever you want. I'm going to ask my friends at the Supreme Court, and they'll take care of me. But the amazing thing is that's not what the Attorney General said. Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who's been actually, despite being a Republican in Oklahoma, has been really good on church-state issues. He said he will be seeking contempt citations for the board of the charter school. He said, if you don't rip up the contract, now that the Supreme Court of our state has said it's illegal, if you don't rip up the contract, I'm going to go after each one of you with contempt citations that carry up to 6 months in jail and a $500 fine for board members' continued non-compliance with the June 25th court order. Holy shit, he was going to go after them. And then finally, after they ripped up the contract, he said, while it's appalling that the board took so long to recognize the authority of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, I am pleased the board members finally fulfilled their duty. And look at this. He just keeps going here, which is great. The proposed state-sponsored religious charter school funded by our tax dollars represents a serious threat to the religious liberty of all 4 million Oklahomans. Like, holy crap, does this guy work for the ACLU? I'm not used to hearing Republicans speak like that, but good for him. Like, he's going to lose the next election, but good for this guy. What's even more amazing is that as of a couple of weeks ago, after the Oklahoma Supreme Court tore down and said you can't have this school, that charter school board voted to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. They were like ready to ignore all of it. And the Attorney General basically forced their hand so they can't do it, which is incredible. What was Ryan Walters' reaction to all this? What was funny is I said it was a unanimous decision to rip up the contract. Ryan Walters is a member of that board. He was not at that meeting. He sent a proxy to vote on his behalf, and the proxy said, yeah, let's rip up the contract. Like, no way. So here's Ryan Walters' response to all this. The Oklahoma Supreme Court has failed Oklahomans in their latest dismal ruling against parents and kids. They have chosen the path of liberal extremism. Let's pause. The Oklahoma Supreme Court, which is majority Republican, has chosen the path of liberal extremism, probably because they're members of the lizard mafia. And Marxism. They're all Marxists on the Oklahoma Supreme Court by depriving parents of a choice. They do have a choice. They can send their kids to a private school if they want. They do not get to just send their kids to whatever crazy contraption a Catholic church dreams up and expect to be funded for it along the way. So this idea that they're depriving parents of a choice is BS. Ryan Walters says, it's shameful but predictable from a failed judicial system. They do not represent conservative Oklahoma values. Like, there is no Republican in the state of Oklahoma who is good enough for Ryan Walters, because even a right-wing Supreme Court and a right-wing Attorney General who says, maybe we should follow the text of our state constitution, those people do not represent conservative Oklahoma values, he says, because he's insane. You know, as I've said for a while now, Ryan Walters, I think, part of me wonders how serious he is about all this. This is the same guy who has said You have to put the Bible in it. You have to use the Bible in every class starting this school year, and they're still trying to figure that one out. I think he's just jockeying to be Donald Trump's next Secretary of Education, hoping to be the next Betsy DeVos. And part of me wonders, if Donald Trump does not win the election, and that means Ryan Walters will not have that job, does he kind of back down from all this? Or does he keep going at it with the same vehemence he's been at this forever? Again, the Oklahoma Supreme Court laid out a very simple reasoning for their decision. It said, our Constitution says this, giving money to a Catholic school violates that, so it's bad. You can't do that. They said tax dollars cannot fund sectarian education. It's not complicated. And had they ruled the other way, it would have been a disaster. It would have opened the floodgates, not just in Oklahoma, but other states would have used that decision to argue for the same thing in their states. Anytime taxpayers have to foot the bill for private religious schools, that means there is less money available for public education, which is, I know, the goal of a lot of conservatives. They just want to ruin public schools for everybody else and force them to go to private religious schools. I'll have more about that next week when I do this live stream. But I mean, the good news for now is that, as far as I can tell, this Catholic school is dead. They are not going to have this thing opened up for the new school year because they were counting on public money, which, too bad for them. That's their fault. It's the fault of any parent who enrolled in this school. Parents will have to find a real school to send their kids to in the meantime. But again, kudos to the Oklahoma Supreme Court for making the right decision, and to the Oklahoma Attorney General who stood up for church-state separation. Basically, good for everyone except Ryan Walters and every member of that charter school board who voted to keep the charade going until the last second when they realized they might get in trouble for breaking the law. By the way, this Catholic school, had it been allowed to open up, it was expected to cost taxpayers more than $26 million over the first 5 years. And this is after Oklahoma voters said in 2016, we don't want to repeal the part of our state constitution that bans public money from going to private entities. They said, we don't want any of our taxpayer money funding religion. In Oklahoma, they said that. And Ryan Walters is like, I don't care what the voters said. We want to do that anyway. So again, listen, if you're looking for hope, Oklahoma Republicans stopped the nation's first ever religious charter school. I mean, if they can do that in Oklahoma, there's hope for everybody else too, right? So good for them. I think I'll stop there for now. I think that's all the stories I wanted to share. There was one more, but I'll get to it next time. And just looking through to see if I missed anything big here. I am not talking about Jill Stein. Who the hell is voting for Jill Stein? Don't you dare. Stop wasting your votes. No, somebody who is saying whatever you're saying about her. Okay. I apologize if I missed your comments. I'm going to stop there. Hopefully we'll see Den again soon. Remember, you could sign up for my newsletter, friendlyatheist.com. I hope you do. You could do that for free, though you don't have to do it for free, but you can. And you can also support me at patreon.com/Hemant. Have a wonderful week. Next week, like I said, I'm going to be at the DNC, hopefully doing some reporting, but also I just want to watch this all unfold. And as someone who's been invested in politics for a really long time, I'm excited to see it firsthand. And so I'll be doing this show on Friday night, like usual, and I hope to see you then as well. Have a good, safe weekend, everybody.